So welcome to CO699 final year project. This is my second year introduction. So the first thing to note that this is an individual project, i.e. it is down to you to get the work done and to manage your project. So we can't state that more clearly. This project is entirely your work. It needs to be managed by yourself, undertaken by yourself. It is an individual project and it's year long, so it's something that's a major piece of work for your final award, and it needs to be taken complete ownership by yourself to do everything within it. Part of the assessment requirement for your project comes from your ability to manage your own work as you would in industry. We will provide guidance and help you when asked, but you have to ask first. So you have to ask us when you want a meeting. You have to ask us for guidance and help as you go along. Each individual project is obviously individual and different. So there's only so much generic advice and guidance that myself as the project coordinator can give. When it gets into the projects, then they start to branch, and questions that you might have and guidance that you might need becomes more individualized. So you rely more and more on your individual supervisors for that, which we'll talk about in a bit. But at any stage of the project, you need to be asking us for help, guidance and advice as you're working through your project. So it's your ownership for it, and part of the assessment, as we say, is your ability to be able to manage your own work and ask for that help, exactly as if you're working in industry. So the boss has set you a project to work on. They don't come and ask you about it every 5 minutes. They normally have a deadline in mind, they leave you working on it, and then they come back at that deadline and say, what have you got for us? So our project mimics that approach. So it's down to you to manage your own work, your own deadlines, your own time. But when you need help and guidance and advice, of course, you can come and ask for it by setting up a meeting with any one of us, normally your supervisor first, but you can of course talk to others in the team and get help and advice and guidance as you go along. So that's all completely open to you, but you have to ask. And it's important to note this really early on, because we get a lot of students who perhaps don't ask for help and guidance, or they disappear on us and we don't see them for quite long periods of time, longer than we should, and ultimately it's because they've kind of put their head in the sand and they're not really working on their project as they should do, and that's a terrible situation to be in. So the only answer to that is to try to stress that you need to come and ask and talk to us as much as possible on a regular basis as you're working on your project throughout. But ultimately it will be down to you to do that. So you need to do the asking. Your project will be presented to us in a research report format that is always written in the third person, and this is without exception. So the third person is writing in a style that's not referring to yourself. It's not referring to the I, not referring to my. It's written in an objective style. So it's talking about the project as the project. And it's a report style, it's a report format. So it's very clinical, objective, logical in its focus in how you write in this third person voice. The third person is classic for classic report style for all final year projects in the scientific areas and the technical areas. So we're not doing anything different to any other university when we ask you to write in this way. The third person is the voice of final year projects across the land. And in fact, everything about the project that we're asking you to do is pretty standard to technical programs, computing programs, computer science programs, software engineering programs throughout the land. So this is not at all odd or strange, but this third person style, this report writing style, we accept is going to be quite new to you, because I don't think we have any other assignments where we ask you to kind of write in this way or to this level. So obviously it will take a little bit getting used to. It takes practice, it takes time, the writing style itself needs to develop, it takes multiple drafts in order to achieve a high quality result. You cannot just dash these things off in a style that's unfamiliar to you and a report style to boot. So you need to work on it. So we're asking you, if you do not understand how to write in the third person, then you need to again talk to us, take the proactive and talk to us about it. We can give you guidance on that. We do have the learning development unit, so you can contact the learning development unit before you start to write anything, and they were a good place to go to again get some advice and guidance on how to write. Obviously there's lots of online resources in terms of how to write in the third person and how to write for final year undergraduate dissertations and so on, which use the third person report format. But I've picked a little guide out that I found online. So the following online article is also very useful, and we recommend that you all read it before you start. So Improving Your Technical Writing Skills by Norman Fenton. I've put the link there. I will put the link out to you as well. So it's an excellent document. It's very detailed. It talks about writing in the third person and writing in a report writing style. I don't think we could have given you anything better ourselves, so we've recommending you have a look through that and use that as some guidance to get you into this writing style. It's very important that you write in this third person, this very objective style, this very logical style, this very clinical way of reporting on the results of your project as it develops. So it's just trying to get yourself into that mindset. Leave the I and the my behind. We do not wish to see that references to yourself in your work. So it is your work, it is your project, it is an individual project, you are the only one working on it, but at the same time, in terms of writing about it, you're writing this very objective third person style, reporting in a very clinical logical way. So it's not what I did on my weekend type style. It is third person, is a report in a very clinical style, very technical style. So some guidance on project help and support. So the first thing to note is that the project is worth 30 credits of your final award. So it is a double module. So normal modules are 15 credits and they last for one semester, 15 weeks. This module, this project, obviously lasts for the whole of the final year. So it's worth 30 credits and it runs over both semesters. So you continue on it all the way through the whole of your final year. We provide a project manual for guidance. We also provide a formal structure in the form of templates for each stage and individual supervision from week 1 to 32, right to the end, providing you return a completed supervisor information form in September. So I'll talk more about the supervisor information form, but essentially that is a form that you complete over the summer period, so you have plenty of time to complete it. It's not a long document, but it's the starting point for your project, and it gives myself as a coordinator, project coordinator, information that I can then use about your project in order to try to align supervisors as best as possible with the kind of best fit. So we align supervisors to each of you and make sure that if there's a possibility of a good fit there, we try to make that happen. So if I know something about your project and the work you're doing, then it means that my alignments can be a little bit more tailored, should we say. So it's really important to have that. Plus it also proves to me that you are working on your project as you should be, and you're in a position where you can start properly in September and you're already getting going with it. So it's really important that we have this information back, and I'll be nagging you for it all in early September, on the assumption that you've actually been working on your project over the summer period. So the project is obviously a major piece of work. You can't get the honours part of your degree award, without successfully completing your project, i.e. you need a pass mark to avoid an ordinary degree classification. So an ordinary degree is a degree without the honours, and it's also immediately a lower class degree. So it's very important that you pass the project and you produce passable work all the way through, and your final project obviously is a pass overall. So it's not something that you wish to ignore or do very without any focus. You need to focus on it, and it's very important, and it really has a massive impact on your final award classification at the end. So it needs some serious concentration. So the project itself requires real self-motivation, time management skills, and hard work throughout for its successful completion. You can't knock out project reports overnight or within just a few weeks. We give you the year to write up your work and to be working on your project through that time, because that's the time it takes to do a really good project. So we haven't been overly generous in our timescales. In fact, to produce a really high class project, one might argue you probably need a little bit more time. Hence why we're trying to get you started in the summer period as well. So the summer period isn't really an official part of the project time, but I do my best to get you going now so that you actually get a little bit extra time that you can do some work in, unhampered by the other module assessments that you will get when you start the year for the final year. You've got a good couple of months, 3 months or so, when you can really dig in and get stuff done purely on the project. So I'm actually giving you that extra bit of time there. But the year itself will go very quickly, and if you don't manage that time well and effectively, and you're not so self-motivated enough to kind of continue working on it at regular points, then it quickly spirals out of control, doesn't work out for you. So you really need to give it a lot of focus and time. As a rule of thumb, we recommend that you devote 6 hours plus per week to your project from now until the end of the project itself, so May to May. The warning on this is this time allocation is based on you diligently working away on your project from start to finish. So naturally, if you don't take that approach, the time you will then need to invest each week rapidly increases to unmanageable levels. I.e., if you're not working on it 1 week, then you've got to make up those 6+ hours the next week. And if you let a few weeks go, quickly you've got a lot of hours to make up. So we think 6 hours a week working on your project is reasonable amount of time each week spread over the whole year in order to produce a first class project. If you start to let that time go, then if you still want that first class project, then you've got to make that up somewhere, and at some point there's a breaking point. You cannot make up the hours. So the more time you waste or the more time you don't do work on your project, the more you're building up that price to pay at a later date, and the price will quickly become unmanageable, and your classification result will then drop because you're not going to be able to produce the first class work that you may want to. So that's a trade-off. That's why we want you to be working on it diligently at regular points. And again, as with any other piece of assignment work, if you work on it diligently at regular points, it becomes manageable, becomes relatively pleasant. It's not a bad experience going through. The work seems to flow and you get into it, and generally you feel you do a better job, and that's the whole point. If you're working on it regularly, you will do a better job. You will draft things through, you will redraft them multiple times, and they will be better for it. So it will show in the writing. So obviously we, as supervisors, as tutors, we have seen a lot of projects in our time. So it is instantly obvious to us when a project hasn't been well developed, hasn't been well drafted, hasn't been rewritten, hasn't been worked on. It comes across like a sore thumb in the writing style, because writing takes time not only to knock out words but also to make it into a structured dialogue, into a words that actually make sense and a structured format that's good. So that's the time that it really takes. It's a space between the words, the crafting of them that takes the time. So as I say, the summer period is really a nice extra bonus time to be getting on with that and getting into the project. You effectively have 1 year to complete the project, which should give you a good indication of its importance and the work level we're expecting from you in terms of the final output. Project assessment: in order to successfully present your project work to us for assessment, you will need to submit the following documents as the year progresses. We provide templates for all these documents, will be made available to you via the Blackboard module area. So the documents themselves are the supervisor information sheet, which I've already mentioned. This isn't actually assessed, but it is a requirement for being assigned the appropriate supervision. So it's not something that we actually assess you on, although the work for it you can then use in your actual coursework. So I've tried to make it so that you're writing work for the supervisor information sheet, which actually becomes then part of your project proposal and interim report and final report. So I'm not asking you to write something extra. I'm trying to get you to just start on the project, and the information you first put down is information I can then use to help in the assignment of a suitable supervisor. So I'd ask for that for around the beginning of September. So normally at the start of September, I'm emailing everyone and saying, please give me your supervisor information sheet now so that I can work out supervision ready for the very start of the first semester. So that's something I will nag you for. The next document is the ethics checklist. So again, this isn't an assessed element, but it is a requirement for being able to continue with your project proposal and the project overall. Again, I will be asking for that in September. This is actually a requirement of the university, and I'll talk a bit more about this in a bit and come back to what the ethics checklist is. It's not a difficult document, it's really just tick boxes, but it is required by the university overall, so we'll come back to that one. So in terms of assess work, we have coursework 1, the project proposal. We have coursework 2, the interim report. We have coursework 3, the final report. And we have PR1, which is an individual presentation at the end. Now I've put C assignment brief next to all of those because we will have information in the assignment briefs for those which describe their structure and also describe in detail the key dates for deadlines and hand-ins and submissions and so on. So it's important that I direct you to the assignment brief for that information, because clearly between now and the start there may be some changes, there may be some structural things and things that I kind of want to just work on. So I put those briefs out in plenty of time for you, but it's better to align you to that key information in the assignment brief, because that's the definitive information about those assignments. So I shall direct you there, but obviously I will talk a little bit about what these are in this presentation, just so we have an understanding of it. Essentially, the first thing to note is that you are doing a single project. You are doing an individual project, which is just one project. We are asking you to submit assessment for 4 elements: coursework 1, coursework 2, coursework 3, and PR1. However, we see the project as a single piece, and what's in the proposal falls into the interim, and what's in the interim falls into the final report, and what's in the final report falls into the individual presentation. So all of those four pieces come together. They are all one in our eyes, and it means that at the end of the day we look over everything that was there. So the proposal, the interim, they're just staging points along the way. We are just checking on your progress, looking at how you are performing at those points. The final report is the project that you hand in. The individual presentation, that's you presenting on what you've done at the end. That's you presenting your work to us as an oral assessment. You are literally stand up presenting for half an hour on what you did from the report. So at that point we've read the reports and we are looking for you to answer some questions that we might have about them, and we're also giving you the opportunity to explain perhaps why things have happened in the way that they've happened or haven't happened, as it may be. So it's normally an opportunity to examine your work, and it's also a very key opportunity, I should say, for us to pick up on those possible students who haven't necessarily undertaken the work themselves, or they've got help and guidance from elsewhere, or they've got code and things that which isn't theirs. They've essentially not necessarily done the work themselves as much as they say they had in the final report. This final year presentation is kind of the thing that might find that out. So it's very important to note, it is supposed to be your work, it is your individual project, you need to be the one who's working on it. If you've done all that and you get to the final report and everything's come in, it's all your own work and everything, the individual presentation is really very straightforward. You're excited about your work, you've worked hard on it over the year, you can talk about it because you've lived and breathed it for a whole year. So it's no bother to stand up in front of us and talk about your work and what you've done, if that's the case. So ultimately, if you take that approach, which is the correct way of doing this project, and you work on it yourself and you do everything yourself and you research it yourself and you develop it yourself and you put it all together yourself, at the end of the day you can talk about it in great detail, and that will come across in your individual presentation to us at the end. So that's what we're looking for, really. In academic terms we call this a viva, and we often do it for big projects that students are asked to do, because it kind of allows us to really judge exactly how involved you got in your own project work, or the project work that you've submitted in the report format. So that's the big one, really. But like I say, if you've done it all yourself, you know it all yourself, you've worked on it yourself, then there's nothing to fear in that final presentation slot. So the ethics checklist, I said I'd come back to this. So the ethics checklist is a standard university form that all students conducting any form of research project are asked to complete across the university, i.e. it does not refer specifically, or specifically apply to your project. So it is just a generic ethics checklist that the university asks all students conducting any form of research to complete. In most cases, you will not be undertaking research work that requires additional ethical scrutiny, so the completion of the ethics checklist allows for adherence to university regulations, i.e. complete the form and continue on to coursework 1 proposal. However, if you are considering undertaking a project that would require working with any vulnerable groups, so children or sensitive data, NHS patient data for example, then you need to let us know before you complete the ethics checklist, as this type of research would then need to be further scrutinised by the University Ethics Committee before you could progress. Now this doesn't often come up, so essentially most of the projects we've seen or we have tend to be straightforward. They're not working with any vulnerable groups, and the checklist from that point of view is just simply tick 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 tick, no, this doesn't apply, in which case great, we're all checked and you can hand that in and you can get on. If, however, your grand project idea does involve vulnerable groups, then it's not to say that we can't accommodate that or work with you to do that. It just means that you will have to put your work forward for greater university scrutiny through one of our specific university ethics committees. Now, there's additional work to do that, and you would have to be very up on your project in order to present that early on. So this work would have to be done as soon as possible, and we'd have to kind of work that through with the University Ethics Committee to get that approved and signed off on. So I'm not sort of suggesting that you don't consider projects which might involve vulnerable groups. However, I suppose realistically, you need to know that there's going to be a bit more involved if you do. So if you're very keen to do that and you're very adamant that's the project that you want to pursue, I'm happy to work with you in order to prepare it for the ethics committee if it needs that extra additional scrutiny, which it more than likely will do if it contains that sort of data requirements, sensitive data, and vulnerable groups that you might be working with. Then happy to do that, but yeah, it's going to require a little bit extra time, effort, and response from you. So something to consider. So the supervisory information sheet, as I said, I come back to that one as well. So this is made up of these sections. So we have the project title, an introduction to the project, some background to the project itself, the rationale for the project, ethical considerations, an aim, and that's it really. So the rest is the glossary, the references that go along with it, and the bibliography, and also a project plan. So all these sections actually appear again in the actual coursework for the proposal. So I'm not again asking you to do anything extra. I'm just asking you to give me part of your proposal that you've been working on early, so that I can get the information I need. Essentially from this, the information that's key to me is what the project is about. So the project title, introduction, background, rationale, any ethical considerations that have been noted within it, the aim, that will give me enough to actually work out what your project is about, or should do. And that will give me the key to hopefully trying to assign supervisors to you in a way which kind of lines up a little bit with their own interests and specialisms and so on. So coursework 1, which is actually the project proposal, the first piece of assessed work, although like I say, you're just simply building up to the final project report, so it's just part of the project report process really with the project proposal. But you'll notice with that it has in white there the same sections as the supervisor information sheet. It also has some additional sections. So we have our project title, we have an introduction, we have our background to the work, we have the rationale, we have the ethical considerations, and we have the aim. But then we also have a set of objectives that go with the aim. We also have a risks that we've identified for the project, and we have this big thing called the literature survey. We still have the glossary, the references, the bibliography, and our appendices for our project plan, but we now also include the ethics checklists that you've undertaken, so that gets appended to Appendix B, so that you have a copy of that included with all the work that you are submitting from that point onwards, i.e. the checklist follows it through and is embedded within your work. So if anybody wanted to scrutinize the project, they would always know that it has the university checklist and the approval required for it. So we just embed it into an appendices, and you might have some other appendices and areas that information you're kind of adding into the proposal that doesn't sit within the proposal itself. It's just there for additional information. Coursework 2, which is the interim report, which again just builds on the proposal. So you'll notice that straight away a lot of the sections are carried over from the proposal. So everything in white there is in the proposal. The project title, introduction, background, rationale, ethical considerations, aim, objectives, risks, the literature survey, the glossary, the references, the bibliography, Appendix A, the project plan, the ethics checklist, and any other appendices. What's added to this stage of the project is the methodology, the requirements, and the design, which are large sections that are added into the work. Now, it doesn't mean that you don't do any additional work on the other sections from the proposal. You certainly do. The whole project continues to be drafted and redrafted and reworked all the way to the end. So even though you are submitting the interim report, which contains sections from all the sections from the project proposal, you need to work on those sections from the project proposal in the interim report, as well as submitting the new sections with that as well. So the idea is we give you some feedback from your project proposal to allow you to work on those sections again, so they can be then resubmitted and reassessed. So these assessments for the interim and the proposal are small assessments. We don't have much weighting aligned in the marks for these two pieces of work, because it's just about stages in supporting you to develop the whole final report. So you're just building it up, and you're getting our feedback, and you're asking us questions, and we're working with you. Hopefully, if you're coming to us and asking us for that guidance, and you're coming for regular meetings and so on, if you're working in that way, then we steadily build up these sections and we improve them. We get them better and better and better as we go along, and that's key to doing a great project. So coursework 3, CW 3, the final project report, that is the ultimate structure for your project. So all these sections are required, and again, all the ones in white are ones that you've already worked on, either in the proposal or in the interim, and at that stage you've kind of got everything in white, but now you've added the final sections, the final big sections to it. So we have the acknowledgements, which is a small little thing, but we have the abstract as well. We also have development, we have a testing stage, an implementation stage, conclusions, and recommendations for further work. So those are all the big stages that we have, the big sections that we add to our final report structure, and that's the whole thing in its entirety. That's the project that you will have made or put together in the report side at the end. So this is a large piece of work. Incidentally, final project reports normally 100 pages plus in terms of A4 pages, so it's a large document that you produce. I have seen projects that go up to 200 pages, so 100 to 200 pages is not uncommon in this type of final reporting. So they're large pieces of work that you will produce, like a book really, at the end of the day. There's lots of sections there, and there's lots of breakdown. My approximate word counts that I'm putting there, that is only very approximate. This will ebb and flow in terms of how many words you write in each section. Do not get obsessed with words. Do not word count. You write the section for how it needs to be written for your work. Normally, and the way I work is with these sort of projects, is you write more and then you edit it down. So any section will normally start off being larger than my approximate counts there, and then you hone it to edit stuff out, the weasel words, if you like, the words that are less important, to leave you with the clear structured words which actually make a solid good report. So if you find yourself struggling to write words for a section, then something's going wrong there. You should really be in the case of, I've got loads of words, I need to actually cut those back and work out what real points from that I want to keep, and what all the waffly words are that I want to get rid of. If it's the other way around and you're struggling to find words, then you're not focused enough. You're missing the point. You're not working hard enough. Essentially, your project perhaps isn't complex enough. It isn't appropriate at working at the appropriate level. You need to put more into it, because you should really be writing lots of stuff and then going, oh, I really need to cut this down, and editing it that way. Editing words normally means, or editing sections normally means, you're cutting stuff out. You're not trying to add stuff in to make it more focused and directed. So you must make sure you take these word counts a little bit with a pinch of salt. it's 10,000 words is kind of our where we sit. You want to aim for 10,000 words overall. We do have a plus minus 10% as always with any piece of work. I strongly discourage from minus 10%. Plus 10% is fine. So if it goes to 11,000, then that's definitely within our tolerance on it. If you go to 15,000, then I would say that you definitely need some editing and cutting back. So you might write 15,000 initially in an early draft, but that should be cut back to the 11 to 10 mark in the editing. So definitely cutting out words. Cutting out words is just as important as putting words in some ways, because it means that you've got a very structured, well-written piece. Well-written pieces are well written. You can write a lot of waffly words which don't take you anywhere, and arguably that is a poor piece of writing, even if it's got a shed load of words in it. So be careful with this. Like I say, if you write words really quickly, then you'll probably need to edit them back. So where do we start with the project? So you need to select a subject to a project early on. This is probably the first stage. This is kind of the focus of my introduction, is to get you thinking about what am I going to do for my project. So your choice of project should be related to your course, i.e. if you're on the games development course, we would be expecting you to develop a game idea. If you are a software engineer, computing or computing and web student, we would expect you to develop a desktop, mobile or online application of some sort. That isn't to say that game developers have always stuck to developing games. Sometimes they do develop desktop or mobile or even online applications as part of their final work. So if you're a game developer listening to this and you're thinking, I don't really want to make a game for whatever reason, you can do something else. That's fine. This project sits across all of those courses. So games development, software engineering, computing and computing web, you're doing the same project, but you're all making something. But obviously you might want to make something that allows you to use your specific course skills, and that's what we're encouraging you to do. Relating to your course area is good. So trying to work in this way to show what it is that you've learned, what it is that you've been working on for the last 2 years is really good. So your choice of project should be academically appropriate, i.e. you will need to demonstrate that you're using knowledge and understanding of development techniques and processes learnt from your course modules plus your own reading. So by academically appropriate, we expect it to be at a final year level for a degree. We do not expect it to be at a first year level. We do not expect it to be basic stuff. We expect you to have learnt something from your course, and that should be to an advanced level. So you should now be able to put advanced skills and advanced techniques into practice, and you should also be challenging yourself to put those into practice. Even if you're not so sure of some of these higher level advanced techniques that are there, you are challenging yourself via the final project to actually investigate them, to research them, to read up on them, and start using them, and start actually putting them into the work. It should be a challenging thing that you are doing, so we want to see that academic challenge demonstrated. Do not shy away from it. You need to be exempling work which is of a high standard, a high academic standard, and a challenge to you. You need to do a project or pick a project idea which you are interested in, i.e. a project you are happy to work on for the whole year. Having an interest in your project is essential, because if you don't, you are going to find it very difficult to maintain focus and do good work. You have the freedom to choose your own project idea, so make sure it is something you want to work on. I can't stress this enough. It is a long time to work on your project. If you get bored with it very quickly, then it is going to be a very difficult road for you. So you need to make sure you have some passion, some interest in what you are trying to achieve, what your project area is, from the outset. Otherwise you're going to quickly get tired of it, and then it's going to be a really hard slog. It's a hard slog anyway. You're just making life even more difficult for yourself. So make sure you pick something you really want to work on. You can take a project idea that you have previously worked on in another module or course as the basis of your final year project, but we would be expecting significant development to take place, and you must be able to fully justify the work you have done, i.e. you cannot simply replicate the previous work you did and attempt to re-represent it as something new when it is clearly not. So I get this question often right at the start. People say, students say to me, I've got this project that I did for my second year, or I did previously outside of the university. Can I use that as the basis for my final year project? My answer is always that yes, it is good sometimes to develop on work that you have previously done. It gives you an understanding of the project from the get-go. You're not starting from scratch. That's all fine and good, but you have to do a significant amount of work for the project. There is no easy solution. You cannot try to re-represent stuff that you have done in the past. It will be at a low level. It will tell in your writing if you try to do that. We can tell how much work you've put into any project that you present to us, and if it's not enough, then clearly it's not going to be passable, and ultimately it's going to be a very weak, poor project. So yeah, sure, take an idea that you've already worked on, take something you've had in the past, you've started to develop, that's fine, but think very long and hard about how you're going to significantly up that, what functions you're going to add, what developments you're going to make to it that are going to be to a significant level, taking it to the next level, essentially taking it to a final year degree level. That's what you've got to keep in your head, because that's what's in our head. This project needs to be of that level and that caliber. That is part of our assessment. Does it add up, stack up as a final year degree project in this computing area? So it's most important that you have that in mind as well. We all understand what it is. So if it looks like a first year type project or an exercise that could be done early on in your course, then clearly that's not working hard enough. It's not challenging enough to you to be final year work. So that's the judgment you need to make. But sure, you can take an idea you already have and redevelop it. Selecting a subject for your project again. Your project should be related to a possible career path, i.e. potential employers like to see your final project work. So if you have a specific career path in mind, try to align your project towards it. E.g., if you're interested in a career in networking, then you might look at developing a project where you create an application for monitoring network traffic. Now, you can tell that's my idea and my interest in the networking world, but clearly you could relate this to any other area within the computing world. So if you have a career in mind, you want to set your sights on a career goal, which is good, and I would heartily recommend that all of you should have career goals in mind coming into your final year, so that you can be applying for jobs early on and you can be preparing yourself to leave university to go into one of those areas. Then why not make your project also focus that way? Focus on developing something that would be appropriate to the industry sector you wish to go into, so that when you get in front of an interview within that sector, you can essentially have something to show that they will understand and will be impressed with for that industry. So this is a smart move. This is a smart thing to consider, making your showcase piece, your final year project, your showcase piece to impress a future employer. So do some research in terms of career path, and do some research on what technologies, approaches, techniques they like to talk about in their job adverts for people of a particular type, and then try to utilize that in your development and design of your application, and also find something to suit that sector of industry that's useful for them, so that you're hitting all those, you're demonstrating your skills, your knowledge, and you're also giving a showcase, showstopper at an interview of what you've made. You should ideally have some existing prior knowledge and understanding of the project area you select, i.e. do not choose a project that you have to start from scratch on, as it will be hard to get going and may turn out to be inappropriate. Yeah, so we want you to have some knowledge about what it is that you are developing in. So so just to give us a kind of minor example here, I've had somebody in the past developing a gym application, so it's a bit of a flimsy application really in some ways, but it gave them the opportunity to demonstrate their skills and show their development. They made quite a good job of it, but it was a fitness application really for working in a gym, so it kept statistics on your time using machines and so on. But the key thing was, from this point of view, was that they were really interested in going to the gym. They were into fitness and health and regimes, and they knew something about it. So they had a great sort of prior knowledge and understanding of fitness and health before they started. So they were basing their application around something they were interested in, and also that they had some understanding of and knowledge about it. They weren't just picking something out of the air and going, oh, I'll do something about that, and then having to go, well, I don't understand anything about how that works. So really important you base your project around something that you understand. So you might make a music app, you might make an application that talks about how to play the piano, but it would be really good if you understood yourself how to play a piano, because if you don't understand how to play a piano, writing an application that's trying to teach somebody else how to play a piano is probably not really going to work out very well, and you'd have to do a lot of work in order to try and work out what the user will need in terms of learning how to play a piano. You might be able to talk to somebody about that and get requirements on it, which is all part and parcel of a project, but at the same time it's just making life harder for yourself, because you do not understand how it can be developed and used. So you don't understand the project well enough to kind of get going quickly on it. So not saying it's not impossible to kind of start from scratch. It obviously isn't, but at the same time, again, why make yourself a hurdle to cross when you don't necessarily need to do that? So picking something you already know something about is probably a really good idea. Although we are not looking for a commercial product to come out of your project at the end, we are looking for a working prototype that demonstrates proof of concept and has been developed to a professional standard and is appropriate for a final year student. So yeah, we're not looking for a commercial project. We're not looking for a product you can actually sell on the iTunes store or the Play Store or whatever. We're just looking for a working prototype, something that actually runs and does what it says it was going to do, ideally, but it's it's definitely at the prototype stage. So we're not expecting a polished, finished commercial project. We're not expecting you to talk about marketing of a commercial project or what you would do for branding and design and selling part of it, because we don't expect it to be a commercial project. We expect it to be a prototype, which you might then want to take on and develop into a commercial project. That's fine. We have our section at the end of the final project report, which you may have seen, which was about having ideas for further development that you'd want to do, and that's where you can talk about maybe taking it as a commercial project and the things that you would need to do in order to do that. That's fine, but it's a small section at the end of the final report that we're expecting you to develop a prototype. Establishing clear boundaries, again, really important. You have a finite amount of time, 1 year, and resources. You will still be completing your assignments for your over your third year, for your other third year modules. So you need to balance your workload very carefully. Yeah, so you still have modules, you still have 3 modules in semester 1 and semester 2 next year. They have assignments just like any other modules do, you need to balance doing those assignments with your project work, which continues underneath. Now, the big mistake that a lot of students make is they go, I'm not going to work on my project at the moment because I have these assignments for this module, and this module. That's a really big mistake. Putting off project work in order to do other assignments is bad. Get that into your head now. It's really tempting to do. I understand why students do that when deadlines are coming at you, and you think, oh, May for the project's a long way away, and I'm in November time and I've got these deadlines for my other modules. Then I understand, why you might want to put something to one side, the project to one side, to work on those. But it's a big mistake. Do not stop working on your project. You might lessen the work perhaps on a deadline point for another module. That is okay, but do not stop. Do not put it on to hold. Do not put it on the back burner. It needs to be continually ticking over. Otherwise, it gathers that time momentum, which means it becomes unmanageable. So, really strongly urge you to quickly try to develop skills where you can manage your workload across the board, and make sure you continue to do that throughout. So typically students develop a working prototype, as I've said, that demonstrates a potential commercial concept, i.e. your final project work could become a commercial project in the future with further development work. So it's important to note that you are actually making something. So the software artifact, as we call it, that you will create is a vehicle for producing the project documentation and the reports. So the final proposal, the interim, the final project report, they're talking about what you've been making. So you have to make something in order to write the reports. So it's essential that you are working on an actual development that you can write about in the reports. Reports won't develop unless you are making something alongside them, because they're writing about what you are making. So this is in fact, why we call the project rather than a dissertation. So a lot of undergraduate degree programs have a final dissertation, and you'll probably hear people on other courses in your final year talking about their dissertation deadline and their big dissertation that they are writing. Your work is your report. That's your written work. That's like a written dissertation in some ways, but it's in a report format, and it's reporting on something you're making. So because we include something, you have to make something and you have to write about it, we call it a project rather than a dissertation, which is just normally a written piece of work. So that's our distinction for it. But what you make is what you are writing about. So it's the vehicle for producing all the rest of the documentation. If you don't make something, then you won't be able to write about it. So everything falls apart. You'll need to establish a clear set of client, system and user requirements and avoid project creep, i.e. you need to plan your project very carefully, and we will ask to see your project plan to ensure you are doing this from the start. Yeah, so project planning, making sure that you are working in a methodical way, using a methodology as you are working through your project, using project management techniques, which incorporates from the get-go a project plan, and the idea of planning out your project is very important to us, because it should be very important to you, because that's the timeline that ensures that everything is coming into place as it should do. If you don't have a project plan, or your project plan is extremely sketchy, then it's less than useful, and that means the project's in trouble. So if you can't write out a timescale that's specific to your project and what you're working on, then clearly you're in trouble. So project planning is vital, and having a plan is vital for that. Project supervision. So we give you project supervisors. Once we've received your completed supervisor information sheet and the ethics checklist at the end of the summer period, you will be allocated 2 supervisors, a primary and a secondary. You should contact your first supervisor every 2 to 3 weeks. This is the ideal. It is your responsibility to make contact and organise meetings. We won't chase you. Now, I've already said enough about that, really. It's down to you to chase us. We don't keep coming back to you. You could disappear on us for 6 months, and I personally will not chase you, because you know where I am. We're in the university, we're in our office, we're around, we're in classes. You can find us at any point. You can email us. We will always respond to that. So if you don't make that effort to get in contact with your supervisor, that's down to you. And ultimately, it will have a negative impact on your project, because frankly, supervisors are excellent resources for guidance, because they're the ones that are going to be marking your work. So because they're marking your work, they will tell you what they want, and they will guide you to develop your work in a way that they feel will generate the best marks from themselves. So, they are really great resources to have. If you squander it, or you don't take up that offer, that opportunity, then that's down to you, and that's your failing, not ours. You should update the first supervisor on your progress at regular points, and possibly request guidance on technical issues, prioritization of workload, structured reports. These are the things that they can help you with. You should always bring project work that you've completed since your last meeting with your first supervisor to the next meeting, so that you have something to discuss. Yeah, it's really important you bring stuff along to a meeting. Arranging a meeting with a supervisor and then just turning up and sitting there and going, tell me, what are they going to tell you? If you don't have any questions, or you haven't got what you've been working on in front of you and in front of the supervisor, how can we guide you without any sense of what you are actually working on? We will always try our best. We always try words of encouragement and so on, but it really works best if you show us what you're doing or not doing. If you're not doing something, be honest about it. If you're not doing it, I would talk to your supervisor and just say, I'm not doing anything this week. I need to do. We'll meet next week. Frankly, that's only a polite thing to do, because otherwise, if we both sit there and you go, and I say, well, what have you done? And you've done nothing. Then why did you call a meeting? So you don't want to waste your supervisor's time. It's good to talk to your supervisor on a regular basis, but it's good to talk to your supervisor about what you are doing when you are doing stuff. So that's how it would work in the real world. You call a meeting with people you want to talk to because you want to talk to them. You don't call a meeting because you feel you have to. You call it because you want to get something out of it. So you need to meet both the halfway. Bring stuff to the meeting. You should always have a list of questions that you wish to seek clarification on when meeting your first supervisor, i.e. if you don't have questions, there is probably no point in having a meeting at that point. So I've said about that, you should come with questions. That's, again, the purpose of having a supervisor. They can help you answer questions. Sending small amounts of your written work to the supervisor will lead to quicker feedback than waiting and sending a larger section. Yeah, so this is again something that students sometimes do. You don't see them for a month or so, and then suddenly, boom, they want a meeting. It's all urgent, the deadline's approaching, and can I send you my entire project proposal or my entire interim report to have it read overnight and somehow miraculously give me loads of feedback which I can quickly and instantly implement and make and get my A grade. It doesn't work like that. It takes time to develop your work, and it takes feedback from constant sort of drip feedback from a supervisor. Plus, no supervisor is going to sit down and read 20 pages that they're only going to have to mark later on anyway, just because you couldn't be bothered, or you couldn't manage your own time effectively enough to kind of show them some of that work in progress in the many weeks that may have gone by when they had plenty of time opportunity to kind of work on the small amount of writing. If you leave your stuff late in the day, again, we're not responsible for picking that up. This is again comes back to the individual thing. It's your assessment, it's your work. You need to work with us on that. So small amounts of writing, things that we can discuss on a weekly basis, that's good. We'll always give you as much feedback as we can on that. A large chunk of stuff dumped on us on our desks to look at 2 days before the actual deadline, we know it's not going to help you, whatever we write at that point. and your desperation isn't our desperation. So just be aware it's better to work in partnership with your supervisor, not treat them as a quick check at the final deadline. You're required to keep your first supervisor updated on your progress and arrange regular meetings with them. I've said about that, but of course you may also talk to other tutors and subject experts about your work. I just mentioned this because sometimes students come along and they say, oh, you've given me this supervisor, I don't think they're an expert in the field that I'm looking at, but another tutor is. Can I switch to them as my supervisor? Well, no, we allocate supervision and supervisors, and that's that. So it's not something you can negotiate, because we are all experts in project supervision. So whichever supervisor you get, they are an expert in project supervision, and that's it, because we can all supervise projects. If you want to talk to somebody who you feel has expertise that is particularly relevant to your work, you can do that. There's no regulation, there's nothing that stops you going up to them and asking, can I have a meeting with you? I think you can help me with my project. And any one of us will go, yeah, sure, I can help you with that, if they think they can. So, it's not like you can't talk to anybody you like. So you can talk to whoever you want, you can arrange meetings with whoever you want. But in terms of your supervision for the project, you need to include your supervisor. So let them know that you're talking to these people. Let them, in your discussions, in your regular updates, you're just letting them know who you're talking to and the work that's coming out of that. Yeah, because that's about managing the project. So managing the project is where the supervisor role takes us. Specific subject expertise and technical guidance, you can ask any of us, and you can feed that into the project. That's kind of a separate thing, but there's no restrictions on that. All supervisors are fully qualified to support you in managing your project of any description. So project supervision is about helping to keep you focused and on track, not necessarily providing specific technical input. Yeah, so that's important to bear in mind, that when you get your supervisor allocation, they are qualified, confident in helping you to run your project and manage your project and do the work that's required for the project. They are not necessarily the technical advisor expert on it. That might be better from somebody else, so you can still go and talk to people in that, but they are very skilled and qualified in terms of helping you to manage your project. So finding a project idea, so software essentially always addresses a specific problem that the developer wishes to solve. So think about a problem that you wish to solve. Identifying a problem first is a good way to also identify a potential project idea. So solutions to problems normally that can be solved using some sort of software or application normally lead to a good project idea. Talking to people in business. So you might say, well, who do I know in business? Well, parents might be a good place to start. Family, friends, friends of friends, friends of family. We may know people who are actually working in industry or businesses, their own business or somebody else's. They might, talk to them about problems that they might have, and maybe that will spark off some potential ideas from there, some software solutions you could create to help them. It also might give you a client to work with, and I'll talk about clients in a bit, but clients are really important as well. They're ideal to kind of make life a little bit easier. Looking to commercial software products that already exist is a perfectly legitimate form of inspiration, i.e. making your own version of an existing application can be appropriately challenging. Yeah, so in the past we've had people make a word processor, an internet browser. So there are plenty of internet browsers out there, plenty of word processors out there, but it's quite a challenging project to actually make a word processor or a internet browser to a certain level. So that's an appropriately valid project. So, and in fact, we encourage you to look at what others have done in software already, and use that as inspiration, or at least use that to get ideas and to contrast with your own development in your work. So it's really good to be kind of looking around and finding other developments that you can kind of draw inspiration from and reference in your own work, and talk about what they've done and how you've approached it in your own work. So we expect that kind of discussion to be in your work, essentially. As a student, you have been exposed to many aspects of computing during your course. Looking to create a project based on previous work in the course is also a possible route, but if you do take this route, make sure your project does not simply repeat what you've already done, as this would not be appropriate. So again, I talked earlier about this, so making sure that, you know, if you build something based on earlier work, you're significantly developing it, and it's not re-representing it, and so on. So I think we've already discussed that, really. Make sure you're interested in your project idea. Again, I can't stress that enough, so I've stressed it twice. So make sure the interest is there. Make sure you are passionate about making the best software you can, i.e. software you would want to use yourself. Yeah, one of the best judges of whether your software application that you make, or whatever prototype it is that you develop, is any good, is yourself. So, you know, if you think it's a bit ropey or doesn't really do what you want, or it's, you know, non-functional, don't dress it up as if it is when you know it isn't. Sometimes, you know, in the writing, you should report on the flaws within your project as well as the successful bits. So we want to see flaws and successes. It's much better to kind of talk very openly about the development that you've done. Don't try and dress it up. So make sure you know, pick something you're passionate, interested around, and then try to make the best software you can. Do not pick anything that would be impossible to build. Don't simply pick an idea because you think it will impress us. Pick something that is realistic yet challenging you. Yeah, I've had students in the past pick, and this seems to be really prevalent with sort of artificial intelligence type projects. Artificial intelligence, as we know, is quite a difficult area to develop in because it's quite high level, and a lot of tools, techniques and approaches, machine learning and so on, tend to need quite a lot of high level technical input and resourcing to work well. So, you know, it's an impressive project if somebody says I want to do something in AI and machine learning, but at the same time it's probably overly ambitious for an undergraduate. It's more the sort of things that you might do in a master's level. So again, making sure your project kind of meets with the level that you're working at, final year undergraduate, and not just trying to pick something that's going to be, yes, highly impressive in terms of title, but really impossible to kind of develop at the stage you are at the moment. So, you know, challenging is what I want, or what we want, but we don't want it to be overly challenging and then impossible to do anything with. Do not pick anything that requires access to hardware resources you cannot easily get access to. So again, I had a project once where somebody wanted to do with hardware, RFID lock systems on doors, and they wanted to develop a whole control system for it, but they had no access to actually door locks, and when they looked into it, it was going to cost them like £1,000 to buy the system that they wanted to develop the software for. So it was just already impossible to do, and it seemed to take them an inordinate amount of time to work this out. And then the project wasn't great, and they had to change, and they had to do something else. So, you know, think through the realistic nature of your work. Is it realistic that you're going to be able to, you know, if it involves hardware or resources of any kind, have you actually got the money to pay for those, the funding for it? Can you invest in it? Have you got can you actually get hold of them? So make sure you consider that. Do not pick anything that requires access to people you cannot easily meet with. So again, if you're developing some software for a specific group of people, you need to be able to talk to those people to find out their requirements and what they need, and that's part and parcel of any project. So if the people you are designing the software for are unavailable to you for whatever reason, then again, it's not a good idea to start down that route. If you can't get hold of those people, then, or access to those people, then maybe move away. A project should be challenging to you, but not to the extent that it becomes impossible to complete. As I've already said, i.e. we expect you to demonstrate a level of hard work, but we recognise that you are not yet a professional developer with years of experience. Yeah, so again, try to pitch your challenging to you, but not so challenging that it breaks you before you've even started. At the same time, do not pick an idea which is very simple and would arguably offer little challenge to a final year student. So again, don't go for, I'll just pick something really easy to develop and I can knock that out and write a report on that, no problem. Because it's not going to stand up to scrutiny. It's obviously going to be something that's too simple. We can't award marks to it if it's that sort of low level. So again, you've got to pick something that's challenging to you and appropriate for this final year. So here's some previous project ideas that we've had. Now this isn't by any means a definitive list. We've had far more projects than this over the time. This is just a selection of really things that I felt were fairly solid in terms of an idea, even if actually in the execution of some of these it didn't really pan out. But I think actually the idea was sound and they probably could have made something of it. So I presented them in that way. They're really just to give you a kind of starting point, I suppose, but hopefully you've already got something in mind. But there's a list here, so you can pause and have a look at this if you like. I won't read them all out. 2 slides worth, so double column, so there's a few there to kind of get started with, but it gives you an idea of the sort of things that people have had in the past and where you might start for. So always open to lots of new things. You don't have to pick from the list, of course. This is just, like I said, an individual project. You've got freedom to choose whatever you want to develop on, so don't be afraid to put that forward. So clients and users, it's very important to have a focus for your work. Obviously, you're developing software to be used by people normally. So having an actual client, or at least having one in mind whilst you are designing the software, is absolutely vital. Yeah, so it's really important you understand something about the needs of your client, or what they want the software to do and what solution they want from it and how it's going to work with them. So if you kind of have that in mind, or you have an actual client, it's really good. So project success is about determining how the client requirements have been interpreted and implemented within your actual software design overall. So this is a really key part of any software development project, that you can show those. You can show your requirements have been executed. So having a client will ultimately make your project run more smoothly than those that do not, simply because you have a specific goal to fulfill. Yeah, a client brings with them a goal or set of goals. You can then set out to fulfill that, and it gives you that really strong focus and guidance to it. Clients bring users with them, and having specific users will again mean that your project will run more smoothly than those that do not, i.e. when you have actual users, it is much easier to gather realistic user requirements. You can go back to talk to them and ask them what they want and get information as you're progressing with your project, show them prototypes and so on. As you're working for it, you get that instant sort of feedback, or that feedback response, so the steersmanship with it. So again, it's really useful if you can do that. So try to think about the clients that you might work with, the users. If you don't have a client, have in mind what a client might want, and try to address users that are appropriate for your software development. So can't really stress that you need to have requirement gathering from actual people who would use your application or software or whatever it is that you're developing in the prototype. So if you have actual people you can give that prototype to, and you have clients that you can try to satisfy, then it tends to work a lot better. Clients and users provide a solid research base for you to develop your project work around. Without them, students tend to fail. Yeah, so you need that feedback, that response from a client and user base. It's really good if you can get that. You'll find your project will tick much nicely along. It'll just work better. So supervisor information sheet, just come back to that. So over the summer period, you need to prepare your supervisor information sheet for your project. This will tell us what you intend to do and allow us to allocate you a suitable first and second supervisor ready to support you when your third year officially starts, i.e. from week 1 in the September. Unless you can present an acceptable supervisor information sheet, your project will not even start. I.e., if you can't use this time over the summer to even write down a basic idea for your project and give that to me to allow me to assign a supervisor, you're already in massive trouble. You're already really floundering. So again, this is kind of why I asked for it, because it points out to me whose projects are the ones that are already floundering. And yeah, I could probably place bets on what the outcome's going to be in May, in September, just based on how those sheets come in. So hopefully, you do a good supervisor information sheet, and I'll be very happy to say you're going to have a great project and it's going to run great, and you're going to end up with a good result in May. But again, if those that don't spend much time on it, or handling something sloppy, or don't handle anything at all, then the it's already clicking, ringing bells in my head that they're in trouble. So anyway, so make sure that your supervisor information sheet is spot on. The supervisor information sheet contains the first 6 sections from the coursework 1, the project proposal. So we're effectively making sure you are already starting to draft out and prepare you for the first actual assessment point. Yep, so that's important. So it's not asking you to do additional work. We're just working towards the proposal, and we're just asking you to submit something a bit early so I can see it. You should also be working on a draft of your coursework 1 project proposal over the summer. As well, so you're really starting to roll from week 1 at the end of September. Yeah, so do as much as you can on the project. All the sections are there. You can work as much as you like. You can get as far as you like through the project. So I have had people in the past do an enormous amount of work in the summer and really get their project really developed and well on the boil when they come into September. It's already coming together very well, and for them the final year is kind of quite a dream, because it's just the project then is just they're just re-editing it, redrafting it, improving on it. It really tells those that put the work in during the summer. So again, kind of no limitations on that. You can do as much as you want to. More is always good. You're provided with a Microsoft Word template for all the documentation you asked to produce, and these will be available in the assignment section of the project module on Blackboard. Yeah, so the project module is there. I know you're not on it at the moment. That will happen hopefully shortly, and at that point you can get to these templates. So the templates are just I give you a Word template for the supervisor information form, the ethics checklist, the proposal, the interim, the final year project, so that everybody's producing it in the same layout, and the structure's there, and the font and formatting is all set, and it means you don't have to think about that, and it just means that the work comes in from everybody in that set format. So it's really important you must use the templates provided and complete the front cover sheet, which is also part of that template, because that's part of our regulations and guidance. Those that do not do that occasionally have them just randomly formatted. They're never good projects for a start. I can say that from of course, because if you ignore my guidance, you ignore our regulations, you ignore what we want, then you're already working against us. And as we're the ones dishing out marks on to assess what we want to see, you're already flowing against swimming against the tide. So look out for the presentations, use the templates, use what we give you and what we ask you to use and is required to use. Make sure you're working in the way we want you to work in terms of presenting your work. Remember, the summer period is not officially part of the time allocated for the project module. However, experience tells us that if a student utilizes the summer period effectively to get a head start, they generally find that their final year is more manageable than those who arrive back in September having done little or nothing. So it's an opportunity to really get ahead and get cracking, and it pays dividends. Absolutely, hand on heart, can't stress it enough. You use the summer period well, you have a good year for the final. Use it badly, waste of time, come back with nothing. It's a struggle from the start, and it's already a hard year. So supervisor information sheet, I've already said these are the main sections on them, so that's just to re-emphasize what goes into that. So just to give a quick rundown of this, and I should state that in the project manual that I'm preparing for you, that we talk a little bit more detail about what's in each section, and you have that kind of written down for you. So that's kind of there, but these are just my brief points on it. So project title, clearly stating the title of your work in the form of a statement of intent. The prose title for your project should be clear, concise, and convey to the reader exactly what your project is going to be about in a short sentence. So it's a sentence, it's not a key word, it's a sentence that describes what your project is, and that's the title of the project. So the title can change as your project evolves, but at this point a descriptive working title is the ideal. Always write in the third person, as I keep saying, not first person. The title of your project is not a product title. Do not give your software a marketing title. So don't call it, Star Flash or Note Blaster or whatever it is. That's meaningless. The title indicates what your work is looking at and is doing, and is platform based and so on. It's a descriptive statement that describes what your work is. It's kind of like the aim, really. You can reflect that in the title, because that's nice and clear and concise, and just reading the title, if it's written in that way, tells us exactly what your project is about. So that's what we're aiming for when we say project title. We're not looking for a catchy marketing tagline. In fact, if we see that again, we know you haven't listened to what we've said. The title should be a short sentence, so in length, very descriptive. Be clear in what you are aiming to create, i.e. what will the software actually do once it's operational. That is what the title should tell us. Be clear on the development environment language you are going to work with, e.g. whether it's Java, SQL, C#, Unity, Python. What languages are being used to develop this project should be part and parcel of that descriptive title. Be clear on which platform you are developing for. Is it Android? Is it iOS? Is it for a browser? Is it for a particular operating system, Windows 10? Again, do not be over ambitious. One platform is normally challenging enough. Just develop for the one. But put that into your title. Be clear on what functionality you expect. You specifically want to explore motion sensing as a user interface in tablet devices, touchscreen as an interface in smartphone devices. Two options, two potential things that we might look at. So again, reflect that in the title. The introduction, this section outlines what your project is going to focus on in simple terms, so that the technology naive reader will be able to understand what the project is going to be about. Okay, so you're writing in very clear, basic terms, saying what your project is focusing on. It introduces your project work to the reader and provides an overview of the software that you intend to create. It's an introduction. This is the whole purpose behind it. It also provides a brief context of the project, which is then developed further in the background section. So the background section is next up. So often students get a little bit confused between the introduction and background. So introduction is introduction. We are introducing your project work to the reader, giving them some context, of course, because you need some context, but that context will really be outlined further in the background. So the background is about a little bit of background research, the feasibility that you've done. The introduction is about introducing the idea. You're expected to include references to sources you have looked at to help establish the initial context of your idea. Yeah, we'd be expecting you in every section of your work to be mentioning the things that you've read, looked at, reviewed, in order to inform, in the case of the introduction, a little bit about context, the background that you know, to your work, to your idea. Where's the idea come from? You must have looked at other software, you must have read other books, you must have looked at newspapers, you might have looked at journals. You know, there will be references that there should be references you have used, and they should be apparent in your work. If you've got no references in an introduction, then it's not an introduction. There's something massively missing if you've not got a load of references and citations within any of your sections. References must be included, and we expect a minimum of 5 for this section. So 5 is kind of an arbitrary number, but you know, I'd probably expect more than 5 off if you push me on it. I don't like numbers. I don't like assigning numbers to word counts. I don't like assigning numbers to number of references. Those questions to me are irrelevant, because the idea is to craft an introduction that works for your project. I'm telling you need to have references in it, which you sure will. What that number is depends on what you are introducing and how it's been developed and what you're working on, of course. So I can't put a number on it. I just know there should be definitely references in there, because you need to be using books and resources and materials that you should be referencing. It's not just coming out of your head. So referencing other software developments or existing work that has been undertaken related to the project idea is a good way of establishing some context of your work. Yeah, mention other. It's not a secret that you're maybe developing something that's along the lines of another application. That's good. I mean, we're happy with that. Mention it, talk about it. That's important. Yeah. So don't try to hide things away. We know these applications exist. Talk about them. How is yours going to be different is what we really want to know, but we want to know the context, so what you've looked at already. Your introduction should succinctly answer the following questions. So these questions are things that I think, you know, reading through your work, I should be able to answer. So what is the software actually going to do? Can you describe the type of functionality your software will potentially address in detail? Why do you want to develop this software? Keep in mind your answer here should reflect on future employment opportunities or what you've learned from your course. How will developing this software link to your actual coursework? What is going to be challenging to you when developing this software? What knowledge skills are you going to use in developing your software? i.e., what do you already know that will help you? What will you need to research in order to gain additional knowledge and skills that you may require? So citations, references, you need to have in it. So again, these questions are to you, but don't forget you're writing in the third person. It's a report style. You have to work the answers to these questions into your work without dropping over into that first person. Stay in the third person. But what I'm saying is the work needs to answer these questions in your writing. So you're writing in third person, you're writing in that style, but I should be able to kind of answer these questions from what you've written. So don't try to answer the questions like, oh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, because that's first person. Stay with the third person. But make sure I can answer the questions from what I've read, essentially. This is a skill in writing the report. It exudes answers to these type of questions, but not in a way that directly responds, as it were. So background section, this section should outline your inspiration for undertaking the project and the work required to get the project off the ground and to the point where you could start to research and develop it further. You should discuss how you became interested in the project, what you were looking at initially, and the background investigation you did before getting started on the project itself. So the background section must set the context for your entire project, why the topic interests you, why you chose the project in the first place. You should also discuss the feasibility of your project. Projects should be feasible. You need to, i.e., to demonstrate that you've undertaken enough initial research to determine that what you are proposing can actually be built within the time and scope of the project itself. So feasibility study. Yeah, you need to do a little bit of research, a little bit of background research, a bit of background work in order to make sure, yeah, this is a project I can do it. It's something that's possible within the scope and time that we have to us, the resources you have. That's what we're looking for in the background. Essentially, the background section links on from the introduction. Yeah, of course, all the sections link together. If they don't link together, then it's a very disjointed project. It's not really working. So, yeah, there should be a nice logical link from the introduction, but goes into much more detail on the reasons behind why you have chosen to undertake the work. References must be included, and we expect a minimum again of 5. I'm putting a number on it because people always ask me what the number is. As I said, I don't like numbers. I want the work to stand on its own. It needs references and citations here, of course. So again, should be different to the introduction because this is background research that you've carried out. The introduction was just introducing the context. So again, should be a set of different resources that you've kind of used. So the background should succinctly answer the following questions. Where did your initial idea for your software come from? What is technically interesting about the software to you? What are the technical challenges of developing your software? Who are your potential users or client? What will the software be interesting to it? Why will the software be interesting to its potential users or to your client? Satisfy their aim. What are the existing applications you've inspired you towards your idea? Citation, references, opportunity. What research did you do initially to investigate the feasibility of your idea? Citation, references to those sources. What textbook articles have you read that helped to inspire you to work through potential ideas for your software? The rationale, this is a very important section as it outlines the specific technical challenges you were trying to address and provide your justification for why the project is appropriate as the final year assessment of your technical knowledge and skills for your degree award. Every project must have a clear and precise justification behind it, otherwise you will not be able to have a clear and precise aim and set objectives. Your rationale must follow on from your introduction and background sections, i.e. there should be continuity between them so that it is clear to the reader that you have understood the context of the work and are fully able to articulate a justification for why you needed to address or trying to solve the identified issues from your initial research. So rationale is about justifying your work in terms of your challenge to you as a final year project student, justifying your work in terms of the solution it provides to users. Those two things need to come together in this rationale. Your rationale succinctly answers the following questions. What user client need will your software aim to fulfill? How does the creation of this software relate to what you have learnt on your course? How does creating this software demonstrate your ability to work in an industry sector related to your course? Why would your software impress a potential employer? Why does the world need another X? Why is your software an improvement on existing products that are out there? Again, opportunity for citation references to those products. Why are you developing a platform X and using a particular language Y? What is the commercial potential for your software beyond this prototype that you're creating? What initial research have you done to underpin the questions above? So citation references throughout. Ethical considerations, that particular section, so any research project or dissertation carried out within the university must be able to demonstrate that it's considered any ethical issues that may impact during the work and received ethical approval from your supervisor. So this section and the separate ethical checklist that you will complete allows you to reflect on the ethical considerations of your own work. It is very important you make reference to specific research textbooks, refer to the university library, that you have read in order to appropriately discuss the issues of ethical research. Now that particular point is really important. Ethical considerations are something that are written about in research textbooks. So textbooks on the process of research will always have a section in them that they talk about ethical considerations. In your ethical considerations in your work, we are asking you to demonstrate that you have an understanding of how ethics in research works. So you must go to the textbooks and read the textbooks and demonstrate that you've read the textbooks within your discussion, within your own work. So use the library resources, look for research textbooks, and we're expecting to see a lot in this section being referenced and utilised and discussed. So this is really important. The short statement that you write for this section should succinctly set out what ethical issues might arise from your project and how they would be addressed in the most appropriate way from what the book, how the books tell you to address them is what you need to kind of be putting down here. You need to carefully consider the following aspects of honesty and integrity, objectivity, carefulness, openness, respect for intellectual property, confidentiality, legality, and human subjects protection. So those are the core principles of any ethical considerations, and they will come across those again in research textbooks. So honesty and integrity, this means that you need to report your research honestly, and that this applies to your methods, what you did, your data, and your results. Objectivity, you should aim to avoid bias in any aspect of your research, including design, data analysis, and interpretation. Carefulness, take care in carrying out your research to avoid careless mistakes. You should also review your work carefully and critically to ensure that your results are credible. Openness, you should always be prepared to share your data and results along with any new tools that you have developed along the way. Respect for intellectual property, you should never plagiarize or copy other people's work and try to pass it off as your own. Always reference correctly. Confidentiality, you should respect anything that has been provided in confidence. You should also follow guidelines on protection of sensitive information, such as GDPR. Legality, you should always be aware of laws and regulations that govern your work and be sure that you conform to them. Human subject protection, if your research involves people, you should make sure that you reduce any possible harm to the minimum and maximize the benefits both to participants and other people. These are core principles that you should build on and discuss within your ethical considerations section. The general requirements for ensuring you adhere to ethics guidelines are that you cause no harm to any participants by collecting or publishing data. You abide by the UK Data Protection Act for the storage of data. You need to be able to explain how the project will ensure the quality and integrity of the research. The project will seek informed consent of any participants. The project will respect the confidentiality and anonymity of research respondents. The project will ensure that participants will participate in your study voluntarily. The project will avoid harm to participants and show that the research is independent and impartial. The aim of your project. Identifying the aim for your project clarifies in your own mind and that of the reader what it is you hope to achieve with your project. The aim is at the core of your project work, and everything you have done or are going to do must be relevant to it, i.e. it is the solution that you are trying to create via the design, the development, the testing, the eventual implementation of your software. Everything you do within the project should and will relate back to and address the aim that you have written here. The aim is also used to assess your project at the end. For example, did you really achieve all that you set out to do? Because of this, the aim should be clear and unambiguous in how it is written. It is a statement you can refer back to and measure against. It needs to be very clearly written and very unambiguous in terms of how it is stated. The aim may be altered as the project evolves, but it is important to try to get it right as early as possible, as it ultimately shapes the direction the project goes, the overall project direction from the start. So it's important to make sure you understand what the aim is and where you want to get to when you set out, so that you are heading in the right direction. The aim is what you are working towards and should succinctly answer the following questions. What is the purpose of the project as a whole? What do you want the end result to be in terms of your software development? What will your users, clients be able to use the final software for? What is the solution you will be creating for your prototype? You need to imagine a perfect outcome for your perfect project and describe what it is, and this is what you are aiming to do. If you are unable to articulate a strong, well-written and succinct aim for your project, then your work is already flawed and unlikely to progress well. So it is very important to establish a good aim early on. The glossary. In the glossary, you need to provide a list of defined technical terms related to your project work. This demonstrates to us you understand the terms that you are using within your own work and can confidently articulate them in an accessible way. You need to succinctly answer the following questions. Have you listed all of the technical terms or acronyms that you have used within your work? Have you provided a brief explanation for each of them and listed it? Citations and references. Have you adopted a consistent approach to your layout of the glossary? By reading your explanation for each technical term, would a non-technical reader be able to understand it? That's the key test with the glossary. The glossary is not just a waste of time. It's not just a list copied and pasted from somewhere else. The idea is to define technical terms so that we understand that you understand technical terms. I.e., if you're able to put together a good glossary, it indicates somebody who understands exactly what they're talking about. So it is not just something we've added in at the end. It is very important to make sure it's an assessment point to make sure you can actually define your own technical terminology that you're using within your documents. References. This is absolutely vital. Every cited source that you have ever used in your work should have a full reference in this section. Have you got a full reference for every citation you've provided within your work so far? Have you got at least one citation? You can cite the same reference multiple times for each reference within your work so far. Are all your references complete? Are all your references formatted in the Harvard style? So we only use Harvard for our referencing style for the final year project. We do not wish to see other styles. So you may come across other styles for APA, Oxford. They are legitimate referencing styles, but they are not legitimate for the final year project. The final year project has to use the Harvard style exclusively. So your references must be formatted in that way. Are all of your references listed in the alphabetical order according to first author surname? Have you got enough references? Should be lots and lots of references coming through. Have you used the following referencing tools? So I've put some tools there. Cite them right online. Cite this for me. RefMe. These are good tools to help you with referencing. The Cite Them Right book, which is the inspiration for Cite Them Right online, is an excellent book. It's a real guide to using Harvard and referencing styles generally. I have a copy. There's copies in the library. It is a core textbook if you want something a bit more paper-based, but Cite Them Right online we also subscribe as a university to that, and again it describes how you can do it. If you're unsure of referencing, because again it's a technical writing area I suppose, it's a bit of a skill to master. Again, your supervisor can help with that. I can help with that. The learning development unit can help with that. So there are plenty of resources to go to. You just have to ask the question or state that you're unsure, and somebody, state that to somebody, one of us, and we can help you with it. But struggle on alone, put in what you think, it's not going to work out. So again, just make sure you're double checking. It's very easy to get once you've got the format right, to use it, and it makes life a lot easier for you. It also ensures that you're going to get full marks for that. So a word on plagiarism. Extremely serious offence and can lead to you not receiving your final degree award. Therefore, this is one of the most important sections within your work. So the references section and the citations you use throughout your work obviously work together to make sure that it's clear to us that you are not stealing your work from other sources and not referring to it, and hence trying to pass it off as your own. So it's really important that you reference correctly and cite your sources correctly in your work, so that you don't fall into this trap. So your report itself must be 100% correct, and the Harvard format in the references it uses. So I've got an example reference there. You can see the style, Notice the author surnames, the year in brackets, then the title of the work. Notice that's also in italics. We have the edition, if there is one. We have the location where it was published, and we also have the publisher's name. So this is considered to be a set format for Harvard. So none of this is included in word counts, just incidentally, of course, but it's important to make sure you reference these works absolutely spot on. Bibliography, again, another key section, exactly the same as the references section. It's references that you provide to things you read. So we expect you to read around your subject area. So they expect references to sources you have read, but not directly cited within your work. So here's an opportunity to show what you've been reading, even if you haven't actually used that in your work. If you haven't used it in your work, then it goes here. Have you got a full reference for every research text you have read, but not specifically cited within your work so far? Are all your references complete? Are all your references formatted in the Harvard style? Are all your references listed in alphabetical order according to the first author surname? Have you done enough reading? You must show reading within your bibliography. I do not accept students who submit project work where they have nothing in this section. None of your sections should be blank. There should be things that you have read, but not necessarily used within your work. Have you used the following referencing tools to make sure that those references are correct? Your project plan, it's really important you have a project plan throughout your work. Again, projects that do not submit without a project plan are normally projects which are going to founder or not do very well, because clearly if you're not planning ahead, you have no planning process, and that's really poor. So have you created a list of the individual tasks to do in order of what you need to do in order to complete your project? Have you listed your tasks in logical order? Have you allocated each task a time frame? Have you allocated each task with a start date? Have you allocated each task with a potential finish date? Have you indicated which tasks are dependent on other tasks before being started or completed? Have you indicated which tasks can be completed independently? Have you linked tasks to specific risks? Have you divided tasks according to meeting your specific objectives? Those are just some of the things that you need to think about in terms of planning for your project. These are just standard project planning type questions, really. You can use project planning tools. Microsoft's Project is a great tool for project planning. There are free project planning tools out there that you can find and utilize if you want a software approach to managing your project and printing yourself a nice timeline or Gantt chart. Personally, I always just suggest doing a timeline list is a good starting point. Just putting things in order. What do I need to do when, and so on, to try and answer some of these questions. Doesn't need to be fancy. It just needs to be a plan, so you can demonstrate you are following something. You're not just picking it all out the air as you go. So Appendix A, that's the project plan. This section contains a preliminary list of project ordered tasks. Tabular format is fine, and an estimate of the time required for each task. A good project plan emphasizes that the project is doable in the time allowed. It shows that you have some idea of the work involved, and you have a clear pathway to follow in order to complete that work. So from your point of view, it tells you how ambitious you're being. If you're being too ambitious, it will come across and it's not able to fit it into the plan. If it needs more time scale, if you're shifting things around, that the plan helps you to do that. Planning in this sense, writing stuff down, producing a plan is really important to any project. If you're not doing that work, then you're not managing your project at all well. Other appendices you might put in, so any tables of data, technical specifications for equipment you're using or resources, code that you've been developing you might put in, diagrams, copies of letters that you might have been sent, questionnaire responses, a whole host of other stuff that you can kind of add in to appendices if it is necessary for the reader of your project to see them. Okay, so we don't want you to chuck in stuff that is not necessary or is not relevant, but it's just a place to kind of put things where you want the reader to refer to them in the work, but you don't want to kind of add it into the work itself. So again, it's just a way of kind of adding it to the project without cluttering up or overly burdening sections. You can put information here and refer the reader to it in that way. So the word count for the project, like I say, I'm not happy with really giving numbers on sections, although I have, because every year I'm always asked for them, and I did try one year and just not giving any indication, and I think about a few weeks into it I got fed up of every single student coming to me. Their first question out their mouths were, how many words should I write for this section? So I've put my approximates on it. The overall project report we're looking for is about 10,000 words is what we worked to, and I've already said about plus or minus 10%, and you can go more, and the idea is to cut it back. So the formal word count, 10,000 words for the final project, doesn't include written work in any of the appendices, the raw research data, interview questions, questionnaires, direct quotations, references, or table of figures or headings. So a lot of that stuff is, that's just extra. That's not stuff you can count. Sections from coursework 1 are brought into coursework 2 and then brought into coursework 3. However, these sections must be reworked and improved for each assessment point. So it's ongoing assessment. Essentially, you are expected to improve those sections and work on them, redraft and work on them as you submit them again. You must not leave previous sections unedited when submitting for the next assessment point, as your mark for this section will fall overall. Yeah, so you might get a good mark for your proposal, and you'll be pleased with that. But at that point, we are basing that assessment of your work on the fact that you've had a small amount of time to develop that proposal. So, if we give you a good mark for your proposal, it suggests you've used the time effectively. If we then get to the interim and you just simply haven't done anything to those proposal sections, and you just chucked them into your interim as they were in the proposal, don't expect to get the same mark for those sections again, because if you haven't worked on them, then you've got twice the amount of time now you should have worked on. They should be further along the line, they should be developed. We can see that lack of development in them, ergo we just think you've not been working on your project effectively enough. You're not developing those sections any further. It becomes poor. So it could become, it could be good in the proposal, and by the interim, if you've not done anything to it, we then view it as poor because you haven't done anything to it. You haven't improved your work. You haven't increased on it. So the idea with the interim and the proposal is about improving your work, getting some feedback on it, and developing it, so that when you get to the final report, which is right at the end, then your work has had an opportunity to kind of have some feedback input into it, and you've had time to fix things. If you don't fix stuff in sections you've handed in previous like the proposal stage to the interim, then again you're not really working very well. So make sure you're continuing to work on all the sections as you're going all the way through, right up until the end. So coursework 1, project proposal, you need to start drafting your proposal over the summer period. The supervisor information sheet will help you with that. So the first 5 sections of the project proposal are part of the supervisor information sheet. So you're not doing anything additional, just showing us that you are making progress on getting your project started. All of the work you do for coursework 1 and coursework 2 rolls into coursework 3, which is the final report. So the project is being assessed as you develop it, with sections being reassessed as you develop them further. i.e. the literature section is in coursework 1, it's in coursework 2, and it's in coursework 3, the final report. So we would expect to see it evolve and develop over all 3 assessment points. The literature section is one of the larger sections within your final report, and its development starts in the project proposal, so it takes time to develop that work. These are the sections of the project proposal, as I've shown you previously, just indicating what's new in the project proposal from the supervisor information sheet. So the ones in yellow are the ones that are added to it, I suppose, from scratch. Objectives, like I say, for those sections, the objectives are the individual elements or milestones along the design, development, testing and implementation path to achieving your overall project aim. So you have your aim developed, then you have your objectives towards that aim. The objectives must be specific to the work that you need to do in order to move toward completing your software artifact and meeting your stated aim overall. The objectives should not be too detailed or numerous, i.e. they should each represent a significant element of the total work to be completed in summation in order to move the project forward towards fulfilling its stated aim. You're looking for 4 to 5 objectives as a kind of maximum here. You only need a small number of key summative summation type points that you can use to represent the aim. Working towards the aim is what you're trying to spell out within your milestones or your objectives that you're setting. It's very important that the objectives work towards the aim and are measurable, which in turn reflects your original rationale for undertaking the project in the first place, i.e. all sections linked together. So the rationale leads to the aim, to the objectives that all come through. So it's important that the objectives are measurable points that you can use to measure your progress towards working towards your aim. The achievement of each objective should be identifiable within your project work, i.e. you need to make it clear when and how your objective has been achieved within your actual project documentation. So you should be able to kind of show how each objective you stated in the objective section has been achieved or worked towards within your documentation. If you broke your final software application into distinct parts, what would they be? User interface creation, database setup, data manipulation processing, graphics, sound, AI for non-player characters. What sort of sections might you have? What sort of distinct parts might you have? What order are you going to create the parts in? How much of your application would you need to create before it had some significant functionality to it? This would be your first objective. From the first objective, how much more of the application would you need to create before it gains another significant function? This would be a second objective, and so on. So you're looking for the distinct parts that make up your application that you are working towards within your prototype. Yeah, that's what the objective should be stating, because your aim is to build your complete software application. So the objectives are stages on that route to that. So if you can break your application down into distinct stages, functional, based on the functionality of the software, that's a great way to go, because then you can test and measure whether you've achieved an objective based on whether you've got working functionality up to that point within your actual development, your software development. So that's useful to you as a way of setting these objectives. Does each objective require a significant amount of work, and will it be clearly identified in your project as such? Is each objective independent from the management tasks of the project? So by management tasks I mean things like research. So sometimes I have students put my first objective is to carry out research. No, that's part and parcel of the project. That's what you're doing. That's what everyone's doing. Doing research is essentially part and parcel of the management of a project. It is a research project. You cannot put doing research as an objective. It is just part and parcel of the management. That's it's independent of that. So you're looking for the objective to reach the aim, not the management side of running a research project. How would you set about evaluating your achievement of each objective? How do you know when you've achieved an objective? Do your objectives logically correspond to the aim? i.e., are they working towards actually giving you the final software that is your aim in this project? The risk section, in this section you should specifically aim to highlight any risks that your project might face, i.e. situations that might occur whilst undertaking the project that would either prevent or delay you from completing specific objectives or the aim of the project as a whole. Most students present this section in tabular format, describing the risk, indicating its level of concern or likelihood, which objectives it will impact on, and outlining a possible contingency action should it actually occur, along with a projected impact on the overall timings of the project, i.e. if this occurs, how will it affect the timescales you are working on, working to in your project plan. Those are your headings for your table. So this is a tabulated section where we have these as our main headings, and we try to answer them underneath. Color coding is also really useful here. Just the normal green, amber, red to indicate the level of risk. So working out levelness in risk is also important. Make sure you put your high level concerns first, the high level risk first in the presentation. So it's high level to medium level to low level. Should be how they're presented. What would delay you in completing an objective might be a possibility for risk. How would you adjust your project plan to deal with the potential delay to an objective? What is the probability of the delay occurring? High, medium, low. How have you determined the boundaries between your high, medium, and low? So if you determine something's high risk, low risk, medium risk, okay, define for me, define for us what you mean by high, medium, low. What's your measurement of that? Where are you drawing the lines? What is the impact of not being able to complete a specific part within that an objective? If an objective can't be completed, can you still work towards another objective or part within an objective, i.e. do you have a plan B to go to? If something that is planned for can't be achieved, then what will you do instead? Are all your risks focused on the creation of your software? All these questions are great because they allow you to actually think around what you're going to put in your risks. Answering these questions is what the risk is trying to do. Literature survey. So this is a huge section in terms of the project work. We use this to identify other work, publications and research related to the topic of interest. It will demonstrate that your project is not placed in an academic vacuum, but relates to research topics and fields that you are currently interest to you. Related research can also help to demonstrate your understanding of the topic area to us, showing that you are aware of what is currently happening in the field and are conversant with other topics that impinge upon it. The research foundation for your project is a literature survey composed of a critical evaluation, conceptualization, and presentation of the material you have obtained to support the successful creation of your software artifact. A review of the literature has the following functions: to justify your choice of project and software development methodology, i.e. it demonstrates that you have understood the project areas upon which your work is based, to provide background information needed to fully understand the project work, to show readers you are familiar with significant and or up-to-date topics relevant to the project as a whole. The importance of a good literature survey within the project cannot be overemphasized. Your review of the literature should be embedded within your discussion and segmented into a series of subsections for each topic area, reflecting a report format. Each subsection must relate directly to your project work. Typical subsections that you would expect projects to contain, we would expect projects to contain these: software interface design. Most software has some sort of interface and design for it, so we will expect you to have looked at the literature for that. Database design. You need to understand databases. Most software uses databases to some form to store its information in, retrieve information. So understanding something about their design is useful. Software development methodologies. We're expecting you to use methodologies: Agile, Scrum, extreme programming. All those sorts of methodologies should be part of your literature. You should understand something about those. Software development languages. Software security, desktop mobile operating systems, game development engines, game development approaches and techniques, research methodologies, qualitative approaches. Alongside these subsections, we would then expect to see subsections related specifically to your project, i.e. if you're developing a diet and nutrition application, we would expect to see a subsection on diet and nutrition, where you demonstrate your research to underpin this aspect of your project work. So the whole point of the literature survey is to show us that you know something about all these subject areas which are important to the development of your software artifact, your project as a whole. And providing these subsections breaks it all down for you. So the subsections you see here, if they apply to your work, you should definitely have them in there. And writing about them, actually, although it's a large section, 1500 words, when you break it down into the subsections, you actually don't get much to write upon each one. And the key with the literature survey is to try and show how much stuff you've been reading, how many articles and resources you've been accessing through the library. So a lot of it is based on citations of sources you've been using, discussing how those sources come together. That's the crux of the literature survey, to show that you've been engaging in that world that supports your understanding and comes into your work as a whole. You're expected to provide an understanding of previously published work that has been conducted in the subject related to your project. Much of the information for your literature survey will be the result of desk research of material already published, i.e. we're expecting you to make extensive use of the university library. Plagiarism, adopting someone else's work as your own, is cheating and will be heavily penalised. In order to avoid this penalty, all sources of information must be properly acknowledged, cited and referenced. Again, use Cite This For Me for referencing advice and guidance. You will need to include appropriate subsections to give this section clarity and structure. Well, I've given you some good subsections there that you can immediately use. What knowledge will you need to create your software? These are questions to ask. What have you read that supports the decisions you have made in creating your software? Textbooks, journal articles, citations to references. From your reading, have you evaluated what you have read? i.e. how has it changed your thinking? Citations to references for these. Have you explained why what you have read is important to the project? i.e. why did you choose to include it within your research? Have you explained how your reading has improved your knowledge? Can you divide the knowledge you need into logical subsections? User experience, database design, graphical design and manipulation, sound design, AI techniques, web services, XML frameworks, project management, software design. Those are examples of logical subsections you might utilize within your literature survey. Is your writing here a logical discussion of everything that has informed your project work? Have you made links to the specific knowledge gained from your course? Have you discussed the knowledge required to fully understand the functionality of your software outputs? Have you fully cited and referenced all the sources that you've discussed? You will need a minimum of 25 references for this section of your work alongside the reference used in previous sections. So again, 25 for a literature survey is quite small, I think. I don't like numbers, as I keep saying, because I think it starts to put a number, a target in your head. It's not about targets, it's about making sure that the literature survey fulfills its purpose, which is to underpin your work and to give you a sound bedrock foundation for the work that you're presenting. So the number of references appropriate to that, which is quite a significant number. I don't know if it's 25, that seems like a significant number, but on the lower end. So again, it'll be down to your own judgment. And also, again, these are questions for your supervisor. Have I got enough sources? Do I need to do more here? Do I need to develop this work? Those are things that supervisors can push you on. So more guidance you might need. Obviously, this is just skimming the surface of the project. The project is a huge project. It's there's lots and lots of questions, lots of stuff that's going to come up. You're going to need more guidance on some of those sections. We will be providing you with a project handbook that gives useful guidance on each section of the assessed project work. So this is stuff that I've written essentially over the years, just to try to give you a steer on it from a coordination point of view. Like I say, I can't stress enough, talking to your supervisor, once you have that supervisor in place, talking to them, regular meetings, they're the ones that will really help you to get on and will guide you in the right way and make sure your work is staying on focus and targeted. So the project handbook is just great for when you're not talking to them, really. So it's just something to refer back to. It's something to hang on to and keep looking over.
and I try to improve it. So based on your feedback and students before you feedback, I try to improve my guidance each time and trying to get it to as definitive as I can. The handbook will give you useful guidance on each section of the assessed project work, plus general guidance useful in managing the project as a whole. The project handbook will be available in PDF via the project module shell on Blackboard once you eventually get access to that, where you will also find the assignment briefs that provide specific information relating to the submission of all the assessed reports, proposal, interim, and final, and the project presentation at the end of the year. So I'm just letting you know that the Blackboard module shell is going to be my primary point for giving you important information. So I'll steer you to that in most cases. So finally, this is my last little slide here. This is just a list of potential books to purchase over the summer and actually start reading. Small list, and some of them are vital. So things like having a really good agile project management book, Agile Project Management Easy Steps. It's an older book, but still really good, solid sort of basis. The C.W. Dawson book, Projects in Computing and Information Systems, the Student's Guide, that's our kind of Bible for projects. It's the best, still the best guide written by somebody in the computing area for computers, projects in computing and information systems. So if you look for these type of project guides, there's hardly anything out there, to be honest. So this one is the best one because it talks to you in a computing way. There's lots of project guides out there for undergraduates, but they refer to dissertations and projects in business and other areas. They're not specifically focused on computing. So this one is specifically focused on computing. So I can't recommend, again, the C.W. Dawson book enough. UML, if you're going to do any design work, you're going to have to get to grips with UML. You should have already got to grips with some of that with modules you've done, but again, it's important to reflect on that. Software Engineering, A Practitioner's Approach, that's the Pressman book, and we've also got a Somerville book in there, Software Engineering. Yeah, so both those books working together give you a real good guidance for software engineering techniques and approaches, and a fantastic basis. So these books are kind of key. And then I've just got a good book of your chosen development language. If you're doing C#, find a good book on C#, C++, Java, Python, Ruby, whatever. Get some good books in that work for you. How to find good books? Use the library first of all. Check them out. We have lots of electronic copies and stuff out there. So if it's not on the shelf, don't think, these books are really old. It's probably because we're mainly buying electronic books now. So check the databases, look through, ask the librarians how to access those. But check out books first. When you find something good, buy your own copy. Used copies are great. Textbooks, Amazon. I never buy new copies personally. I always buy used copies. Clean used copies. Textbooks tend to be great for that. So you don't need a brand new textbook. A slightly thumbed, dog-eared textbook is fine, and you can definitely save money on it. Older editions are also a way to go if you want to save a bit of cash, especially with something like Software Engineering, the Pearson, the Somerville book, and also Pressman as well, because they kind of knock out a new version of that every year. Not much changes in a year. It's just that the publisher encourages them because they're bestsellers. So going back to an old edition, still very useful, might save you a few pence on it. So again, good. Good book on databases. All software developments rely on storing information somewhere. So good book on your whatever database system you think you're going to use. Good book on developing your chosen platform. So if you're doing stuff in Android or Windows or Apple iOS, then understand the platform you're developing on. If you're doing games stuff, engines, then know your engine. So Unity or whatever it could be. So make sure you have an understanding. So loads of books you can potentially buy books, have them piled on your desk. Make sure you reference all of them clearly. that's going to be a really good resource to draw on for your work to make sure your project's really taking shape in the way it should do. So anyway, so this is hopefully enough to kind of get you started on the project. There's, like I say, I know I don't answer all questions. There's a huge amount of questions out there. Your project will have distinct questions from your colleagues or friends' projects as well. At this stage, before you get your supervisor allocations, then I'm kind of the one that students come to. So please ask me questions and send me stuff back. If I think it's a question that I think a lot of students might have or I haven't addressed in this presentation, do make sure you look at this presentation first. Make sure you look back over what I've said, because clearly if I've said it, I'll just go, I said it on this slide, refer to that. So before asking me or sending me an email, just make sure I haven't, I may have answered it already. Hopefully I've answered most of those sort of basic generic questions. But I'm happy to answer more, and I think it's worth going out to all of you. I'll probably put a response out to everybody. But yeah, so at the moment I'm your main point of contact until we get the supervisor sorted out. So over the summer, respond to me. Having said that, if you want to start talking to individual tutors on the basis of, I really want you to be my supervisor, I do kind of encourage that a little bit. Like I say, we can't guarantee allocations to name supervisors, and I certainly am not going to get into the whole world of you decide what you want and then you tell me, because in this game we are the ones that set those rules. So we set who you're going to be assigned to, for good reason, that we have to divide up the work across the team, and that's part of our regulatory responsibility. However, if a student over the summer period forms a bond with a particular tutor, and in September when I'm doing the allocations, what I normally do is put out an email to the team, the tutor team, and I say, who do you want? And so if you've already established a relationship with a tutor and they come back to me and say, yeah, I really want student X and Y, that's what they get. So, ultimately I'm a project coordinator, but I go with what the team suggest or want to do initially. Again, if they have no interest or they have no specific requirements, then I just allocate. So you can, if you're a bit proactive, what I'm saying is you can influence that a little bit by forming a relationship early with a tutor, and maybe don't stalk them, but try to talk to them early and talk to them about what you're doing, and get into discussions like that. And it's more likely that they'll tell me that they kind of want you as their as a supervisee early on. So I think that reflective of real world as well. So it's a little bit of appropriate there. If you're proactive and energized, then that's good. That's what I want to encourage. So do talk to tutors early. Anyway, like I say, hopefully that's given you a bit of an introduction to the project. Do come back to me. I will be providing the handbook later on to cover everything else. And there will be the briefs, of course, for the assignment dates and so on once I have those. So, yeah, thank you very much for listening.